Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Footy Talks LaLiga, another great episode here on a Tuesday afternoon. I'm Carlos Verde, joined by Michael DeLuca, and thanks to the fine folks at Homestand Sports for putting this on. It's been an incredible couple of weeks in La Liga. Matches are coming, fast and furious. New match days turning over every 3 or 4 days, Michael. There's a lot to get into. We will talk about the title race, but first off, we've got two fantastic guests this afternoon. First off, we'll have Colin Millar, author of Frying Pan of Spain, the Battle of Andalusia, an in-depth book. He joined us last time we were on here, and we're going to talk more with him about kind of current La Liga issues and moving forward, what the future of things like transfers, things like large clubs versus small clubs looks like for La Liga moving forward. And then we'll also be joined later on at about 12:45 by José Galán from Valour FC in the CAMPL. So a guy that spent time in Athletico Madrid setup, also was at Almeria, and we'll have an opportunity to chat with him about his experience all over the world, and specifically with one of Spain and Europe's largest clubs. So Michael, let's get into it. It's been a pretty crazy couple of days. Villarreal 2-2 draw with Sevilla yesterday. You had Celta Vigo blowing out Alaves 6-0 at home. What's kind of caught your eye over the last week or so here in Spain?
I find it strange that we're still, we're talking about new normals, but it's still things don't feel like normal. Some of the teams who we expected to come out of the gates flying did. I've been really happy to see that we've had a glut of fantastic goals in the return to play. And you're right about things being fast and furious. I mean, we're only, 2 weeks, I believe, out since the return, but we've had the equivalent of 4 match weeks because we've had to push games into midweek and overload our weekend games, of course. But we've had some sensational goals. I know you'll dive a little bit deeper into one of your favorites from the week in a moment. But something that's caught my eye, I mean, most teams are coming into these weekends games clean of injuries, which has been nice. So you're starting to see, at least on paper, what would be a full set of squads. And something that hasn't totally surprised me is the team chemistry isn't exactly where it was pre-break, but I have to say, all in all, I've been really, really impressed with the level of intensity, and I've been really happy with the level of football that we've seen upon the return. So, that would be my key takeaway. Simple one, but one that I think is so important for the return to play. Yeah.
And let's talk a little bit about that background you have going on, because it's a little stadium, little complex that maybe not all North American fans might know. Give us a little bit of background about the beautiful little stadium behind you.
Yeah, little might be a bit of a misnomer. Yeah, considering that this is a training ground, and you might be, if I tilt my head here, sadly, no, I'm not actually taking this call, obviously, from the beautiful stands of the Estadio Alfredo Di Stefano, but that is the name of, Real Madrid's training ground. For anybody who may not know, if you've seen Real Madrid highlights in the last couple games, or certainly the first game back, Toni Kroos scored a lovely goal in what did not look like the Santiago Bernabeu, and that's because they felt it was a safer decision to play these games at their training facility, which is obviously named after club legend Alfredo Di Stefano. So that is, that's a shot of that stadium. 10,000 seats and change, something close to the 10,000 mark for a training ground, which is incredible, but shouldn't really be surprising considering the club we're talking about, that they have 10,000 seats at their training ground. It's a beautiful park. I know, in all seriousness, it's fantastic that they even have that ability to host games there. So that's where they're doing it. It's a nice little intimate ground. But yeah, that's where virtually I am today.
And let's get right into it here. We'll talk a little bit about the table before we bring Colin in. Real Madrid and Barcelona tied dead heat on 65 points. Real Madrid obviously winning 2-1 in a match which featured plenty of controversy up in San Sebastián against Real Sociedad. Barcelona drawing 0-0 with a very defensive Sevilla. So 65 points apiece atop the table, and we're also going to talk more in depth with Colin about the relegation battle, which is shaping up to be quite a tilt, Michael. You've got Celta Vigo on 30, Eibar on 29, Mallorca on 26, Leganes 25, and Espanyol on 24. Mallorca, Leganes, and Espanyol, as things stand, would be going down. And some teams in there that maybe you're a little surprised to see. Your Celta Vigo, your Espanyol. Now, Espanyol's kind of played on death's door at times over the past couple seasons, but nonetheless, pretty interesting to see some larger, pretty well-supported clubs down there in the bottom.
Yeah, it's getting squeaky bum time for some of these clubs. It really is. I mean, if you think about it, that from 15th to 20th, in order. It's Valladolid, Celta, Eibar, Mallorca, Leganes, and Espanyol at the basement of it all. But if you just look, I mean, if you compare, let's take Celta, for example, they got a total market value in their squad of $162.5 million front to back. Compare that to Eibar, who's ahead of them by one position with a total squad value of $58 million. I mean, there's no business, and I don't intend to be reductive here and say that, squad value is definitely supposed to correlate with league position, but Celta should have no business being down there, especially with a prolific attack, or at least one who in the past has shown to be prolific. And Espanyol, same thing. They got a total market value across their squad of $145 million. What's really concerning too is some of the other clubs in there, namely Leganes, also with a pretty beefy budget there of almost $90 million, and they're tied up in their players. They have several players on loan deals coming to term in July. So they really want to climb out of that bottom six, as does everybody, but in particular those clubs that have a glut of players sitting on loan deals, because it's going to be extremely hard to lure them back for another season if they find themselves in the Segunda. And you could just be looking at a whole entire team overhaul, which is not beneficial for anybody's progress and continuity. So yeah, it's concerning for those clubs, in particular those ones with big time budgets.
So without further ado, let's bring in special guest Colin Millar, author of The Frying Pan of Spain, Sevilla versus Real Betis, Spain's hottest football rivalry. That's available on Amazon. Colin, thanks so much for joining us again. First off, we're going to ask you and Jose later on the show today, but first off, just give us your picks. There's 5 teams kind of floating in and around that danger zone right now. As of today, who do you think are the 3 sides that are going down at the end of this season? Colin, you there?
Oh, yes, guys. Sorry. Thanks.
Oh, there we go. No worries.
Sorry, the audio was slightly delayed. Yeah, no, I was listening to your talk there about the situation in Liga with the bottom 6 or 7 clubs. It's quite close. The bottom 3 are caught adrift slightly at the moment. And when I look at the situation, and I've been thinking about this, obviously for the past couple of months, there's 2 teams who stand out as being in real trouble. The first one's Leganes, partly because you look at what happened. They've had terrible luck throughout the season, and then obviously in January, Youssef En-Nesyri, his 20 million release clause was triggered by Sevilla, so you lose your top striker, and then obviously the following month with Martin Braithwaite leaving, they don't have any goal threat in their team anymore, and they've had to readapt. They are a team like every team in La Liga. They're hard to beat. There's no teams in this league who you kind of look at and think, they're completely out of place here, which has been the case in a lot of previous seasons. But this year's a bit different. But they just don't have enough firepower, and I think that's cost them, especially in recent weeks. Their main goal threat is Oscar Rodriguez, on loan from Real Madrid, and yeah, he's a fantastic young talent, but all his goals are coming from set pieces, from free kicks and penalties, and in open play, they just don't have enough at the minute, and I don't think they're going to get out of this. The other team who I think have been in real danger all season is Real Mallorca. And the reason I don't think they're a bad team, obviously they won promotion via the playoffs last year. They've had this remarkable rise over the past couple of seasons. But again, they're a team who've really, really struggled away from home. They haven't been able to put a consistent run of results together all season long. And when you look at the situation right now, when you've got, 8 games remaining of the league table, they're going to need that, because they're 3 or 4 points off. If any team down there gets to run 2 or 3 results together, they'll be okay. But Mallorca's away form, it just hasn't. They haven't won on the road all season, I don't think, and they are a team who are so dependent on their home crowd as well. And obviously that's been taken out of it with the situation we're in. And you guys just mentioned Espanyol, who are a bit different. And okay, they lost to Levante at the weekend, which was quite a disappointing result, but prior to that, they really impressed me when they beat Alaves 2-0, and it could have been a lot more than 2-0. And they also got a point at Getafe with 10 men for most of the match. So this is a team who, again, are very well drilled. They've got an attacking threat. Obviously, Raúl de Tomàs, they spent 20 million euros on him in January. They've got Wu Lei, the Chinese striker. They've got players who will score goals. They've got a very well set up team. Obviously, Abelardo is a great coach who's had success in La Liga over the past couple of years with teams of that stature as well, and I actually think that they could be okay. Now, obviously, this situation changes week to week, and there's so many games at the moment. It's so hard to say. And you guys mentioned Eibar as well. And again, you look at their team, and they're not a team of any any real star players. This is all about what Mendilibar has built the club, and this sort of continuity and a really good team spirit. But again, since football's come back, they haven't picked up a victory yet, and I think that's going to be something that's in your head going into this final stretch of games. You need to get a bit of momentum going at this point, and even look up the table to the Real Betis, who you kind of thought a couple of weeks ago, there's no way they're going to get dragged in. Maybe they're still looking to Europe, but with the form they've been on, obviously they've sacked Ruby, and with Alexis Trujillo coming in, he's a sporting director, he's not a coach, and obviously there could be a sense that results pick up immediately. But if they don't, they're from the Espanyol this next game. Now that for me is the most important game of the match day, because if Betis don't win that, then you're starting to think, could they genuinely get dragged into this battle? And if Espanyol would win, obviously the gap's down even further. And then you look at Real Valladolid, another team who struggle to score goals, yet tend to do just enough. Again, a very well-drilled team. They usually can frustrate the opposition. And then Celta Vigo, who were the league's lowest scorers until this weekend, and they go and beat Alaves 6-0. So that's obviously that was a match conditioned by an early red card and an early penalty, but nonetheless, they've got Iago Aspas, they've got players like Santi Mina, obviously Nolito, I signed last week, and you guys are talking about squad value. They have a standard of player, as do Real Betis. Real Betis and Celta Vigo were the two teams who for me have been incredibly disappointing this season. They've really underperformed. They should not be in the positions that they are, but it does show you that this league, again, it's not predictable. There's no games when you think, that it's going to be a home banker one way or the other. Even last week when Leganes went to Barcelona, they frustrated Barcelona for most of that match, and it was only a debatable penalty decision at best, which really sealed that game. It was only 2-0. So, you're asking what's going to happen, and the truth is none of us really know, and that's what makes this league this year so intriguing, in the sense that every area of the table, whether it be the title race, the battle for the top four, European places, or avoiding relegation, it's also tight, and it looks like it's going to go down to the wire. But Leganes and Mallorca are the two teams I would really worry about at the moment.
Is it too easy to say that Espanyol is the club with the most to lose? And I say that only because they're a very well supported club. They've only fallen out of the top flight 4 times since 1928, since La Liga's inception. So there's a lot riding on this in terms of what the fans expect from a club of that size, but also we were talking about squad value. With the transfer market not being what it was in the coming year, they could have a lot of players who are coming to term on their contracts who are not going to try to look to renew into next year, in particular if they go to the Segunda, and there might not be the availability of talent that there once was to replace those players. So is Espanyol the team here in a lot of different ways, like I was saying, the one who has the most to lose in your eyes?
Yeah, absolutely, and those situations are magnified by this sort of austerity that football is going to be facing for the next year or so in terms of the transfer market. Player values are going to go way down, and you look at Espanyol, and they have some very, very important players that if they were to go down to Segunda will leave. And you look at Marc Roca, who's the sort of club captain. This guy's come through the youth system, really, really important central midfielder. He's been linked to Bayern Munich. He's been linked to Arsenal. And you'd imagine he's going to be one of the first players to go. The money they spent in January as well. I mentioned Raul de Tomas. They spent 20 million euros or 22 million euros, I think, on him. And that's a guy who scored 5 goals in his first 5 games for the club in the league, and somebody who was proven at Rayo Vallecano last year. Obviously, Benfica bought him and didn't work out there. But these are important players. Leandro Cabrera, another one, he swapped European football with Getafe to join Espanyol. So they have really gone out to secure these players that they think are going to get them over the line. They've gambled. You said this is more important for Espanyol because unlike Leganes and Mallorca, two clubs whose budget isn't at the same level, their potential for spending and their capacity isn't at the same level. For Espanyol, it is. You talked about Celta Vigo and Betis as well. These are clubs who need this money from La Liga to be coming in through the TV deals to retain the players that they've brought in because they have gambled. They think, right, 22 million on De Tomas, that's quite a big outlay for Espanyol, club record signing. But if it maintains their top flight status, it's money very well spent. But if it goes the other way, you're thinking, right, we're in trouble here. So yes, there's a lot riding on this for them. And again, I think they've got a good coach, they've got a good setup. They've obviously got players that have the potential to get them on a winning run, but they need that now. You're thinking there's only 8 games. So if they go to Betis on Wednesday night and they lose, and you kind of think, right, that's probably better safe. So, they're not going to catch them. Are Eibar going to pick up points? Is that gap going to grow from 4 to 5 to 6 to 7 points over the course of one game? And then you're thinking, right, now you're really in trouble. So, yeah, Espanyol are the club that have the most to lose as things stand. I still think they will get out of it. As I said, I still think that they've got enough about them. There's enough signs there that they believe in themselves as well. They're not going to go down without a fight. But yeah, these couple of games coming up are so important for them.
Their fixture list terrifies me, though, and I agree that I think they're the best positioned club to try and get out of that bottom three just based on the squad value. Never understood why the Tomas didn't work out at Benfica. I thought that was going to be a slam dunk for them. But you look at Espanyol's 8 games down the stretch. They're at Betis on Thursday, home to Real on Sunday, then at Sociedad versus Lega, at Barça versus Eibar, at Valencia versus Vigo. So basically, if they don't take 4 wins from those 4 matches against the teams above them, it's going to be a rough ride for them, because it is, even with the squad and the managerial setup you mentioned there, it's still very tough for me to see them taking 3 points off of anybody in the top half of the table right now. And I think I'm going to disagree with you. I think Espanyol's too far gone. And as you mentioned, big problems for them if they do end up in Segunda next year.
Yeah, and it's a good example as well. These 6-pointers that they've got coming up. I mean, those are the games they need to win, because we even looked at what Alaves did. They get beat 6-0 at Celta Vigo. They went down so meekly at Espanyol. Yet the flip side of that is they beat Real Sociedad 2-0 at home the other week. And so these results, it's hard to predict. There doesn't seem to be a lot of pattern at the minute, and that's understandable because games are coming so thick and fast. There's a lot of rotations, more substitutions per game. Nobody really knows the impact of this. People would have thought, that's going to favour the top clubs because you've got better players to bring on off the bench. But it's not necessarily working out that way, especially not for, say, Barcelona as an example, because they don't really have the squad for that. And then maybe you look at people like clubs like Espanyol thinking, well, if they can bring on fresh legs off the bench to reinforce their defence. But it's these 6-pointers, as you said, they need to win those games. The other ones are a bonus, that's the thing. These games count double, and that's like a mini league at the minute between those 6 or 7 clubs down at the bottom. If they can take points off each other, it's huge. It's absolutely massive. So those are the games they're really going to have to win, and if they don't, they're in huge trouble.
Mm-hmm. Looking beyond this season and kind of circling back to these transfer market implications, especially for teams in the lower half of the table, is it those teams who have a more well-structured, well-oiled academy system that are going to be able to ride this COVID wave better than others? Because you're not going to be able to just dip right into the market and expect to find an availability of talent and players who are willing to open up the conversation at their parent club about, redesigning the structure of their contract or looking to back out of it early. You're going to see a lot of players looking to see out the remainder of their contract. This is a terrible time to negotiate something stronger. And you look at teams like Bilbao, for example, they might be the one, for instance, to ride out this period much, much better than some of their counterparts. I mean, do we know of any of those teams in the bottom 6 that we've been discussing who have an academy setup that might be able to actually produce some talent that is able to remain competitive into 2021 if they find themselves in Segunda? Who would that be?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, and obviously we've spoken about the impacts of the pandemic, and we can't quite be sure of what that will mean going forward in terms of just how far that will go, just how far finances, wages will have to be slashed. But I think that you look at Spanish football clubs in general, certainly in La Liga, and a lot of them are generally very well run, certainly in comparison to other top leagues. Obviously, you mentioned Athletic Bilbao, who've got this policy of only signing players who've come from the back country or who've been trained there. So every year they have a very, very small turnover of players. They've got a lot of continuity there. They're a very well run club in the sense that they don't even really negotiate on transfers. If there's a member of their first team who another club wants, they're like, well, you pay the release clause of that player. And you look at Kepa Arrizabalaga, who went to Chelsea, I think 2 years ago now, and that was about an 80 million fee for a goalkeeper who was worth a fraction of that, really. But that's what they've done, and they've built up this huge reserve cash. And yes, they're very well placed to see out this storm. Some clubs that aren't, I mean, you look at Barcelona, probably the biggest one in terms of just the fact that their wages, 80% of their budget goes on their wages. So if their budget and income's reduced, that's going to immediately impact on that. And the same goes for Athletico Madrid. That's why getting top 4 is so important for them. But in terms of the bottom clubs, I think you look at Eibar are a club who are very well run. Leganes, again, our club are very well run, who made a lot of money on those two strikers who they sold earlier this year. And even if they were to go down, yes, they're going to be a small club even in the second division, but they've got a financial structure in place whereby they can see this out. And we look at a lot of the clubs who've dropped down to the Segunda in the past 15 years, big clubs like the Real Zaragoza, Sporting Gijón, Real Oviedo, who have almost disappeared because whenever the banks collapsed about 10, 12 years ago, their entire finances were shot, and they haven't recovered since. But that's created this void whereby the likes of Leganes, the likes of Getafe, Eibar, and others have come through from the lower leagues and established themselves at the top level. So yeah, there's a lot of clubs who are very well structured there. Obviously, we talked about Espanyol, Celta, and Betis. Betis especially are a club who are hugely unstable financially, but yeah, they've all got potential. So yeah, certain clubs going down will be hit more harder than others. But if you look at La Liga in general too, a lot of the clubs don't spend a lot of money. They are very savvy when it comes to loan deals. Integrating youth players into their first team. Signing players as free agents and the like. So yeah, there's no real clubs in that section who are going to be overly worried in that sense just yet, especially if fans are going to be back in the stadiums this calendar year, which fingers crossed they will be.
Colin Millar, author of Frying Pan of Spain, thanks for joining us, and give us a little plug. Where can people find you on Twitter, and tell us a bit about your work?
Yes, so on Twitter, I'm at Miller_Colin. And yeah, a lot of my work's on the Football España website as well. I sort of run and edit the site. So any English-speaking fans of Spanish football, it's perfect. And yeah, I wrote the Frying Pan of Spain as well about the history of Sevilla and Real Betis.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for joining us again, and I'm sure we'll catch you soon.
Lovely to be on. Thanks for having me, guys.
That's Colin.
So there's, again, Colin Millar, the author of Frying Pan of Spain, a phenomenal book in depth on the socioeconomic and on-pitch rivalry that exists between Sevilla and Real Betis. It's available on Amazon. Highly recommend it for any footy fan. So, Mike, that brings us into our next segment here. We're going to talk about three things, and it's three things that you and I each saw over the past week or so in Spanish soccer that we wanted to highlight. And I guess I'll start with the obvious one, which is the return of Bruno Soriano with Villarreal yesterday. This is a guy that missed 3 years, severe knee injury. He even came out post-match and said, there were times where I thought about giving up. There were times if I wondered if I was still going to be able to do this as a career. And he comes on yesterday, and granted, it would have been nice for him to come back to a full Estadio La Cerámica, but of course, in this environment, nonetheless, awesome to see the outpouring of love for him on social. He's a guy that, he featured for Spain at Euro 2016 as not a spring chicken at that point either. And, he's been able to come back through this injury, and you just hope he can stay integrated in that squad moving forward and become a regular. But it was great to see Bruno Soriano back with Villarreal yesterday. Second for me is Gonzalo Guedes' golazo for Valencia. I'm not sure if maybe we can share the tweet on the Footy Talks account, but that was just a phenomenal goal against Osasuna the other day. Goes through 5 defenders, scores an absolute wonder goal in a 2-0 win at home. And maybe
it's the best part of the game too. Like, didn't even fall over. He had a chance to go down, take the free kick, and continued on. Sorry to hijack.
He could have gone down 2 or 3 times. That's the amazing thing. As he stumbles, he takes a tackle, but he was determined, and then he just upper 90, a phenomenal finish. Kind of reminiscent of his form in 16-17 with Benfica right before he earned that 40 million euro move to PSG. So we'll see if Valencia end up, recapturing Gonzalo Guedes' early golden years, because he's still got a lot of runway ahead of him. So that'll be interesting to see what happens there. And then lastly for me is Celta Vigo just putting the hammer down. Granted, against a 10-man Alaves, but it was fantastic to see that club with some of those names, your Iago Aspas, your Rafinha, I think had 2 goals in the win as well. It's a pretty special club in an often forgotten part of Spain. Galicia, it's that tip that just kind of hangs over the northern part of Portugal. In a lot of ways, it's almost 50% Portuguese, 50% Spanish, a lot of commingling over generations there. And a part of Spain that often gets forgotten about. But nonetheless, Vigo, Deportivo La Coruña, there's some great footballing tradition there, and fantastic to see them earn that 6-0 win and create a bit of breathing space now, as I believe they're 4 points north of the relegation zone right now. So here's hoping, at least personally, as a guy with family ties to that region, that hopefully Vigo can stay up, and some La Liga classics on that squad as well. So for me, those are my three things. Bruno Soriano's return at Villarreal, Gonzalo Guedes' phenomenal goal for Valencia, and Celta Vigo hopefully starting to trend in the right direction. Over to you, Mike.
Yeah, there's nothing that makes your heart warmer than an area in Spain that can embody the 50% of Portuguese culture and the 50% Spanish culture. That's
perfect reflection.
Yeah, it's a slam dunk for you. So for me, I'm going to go for the big boys. Something that I enjoyed this week was we all returned to watching La Liga football with a beardless Messi. Because he's taken us through a lot, like in the last few years. Remember the blonde phase?
God, don't bring that up.
Right. So there was that. And then we had the beard phase, and he went very much for this authoritarian sort of leader, like, beard. And it's funny because everybody has come back from lockdown, you think, with more hair and more facial hair, trying out new things. No, he went the other direction, came back beardless. So that was kind of funny. I enjoyed seeing that. Someone on Twitter also said he looks like a young Gary Neville, which was really enjoyable. And on a much more serious note, it was really nice to see Tony Cruz actually came out and was one of the first high profile white players from one of the big top four clubs to come out and vocally support the Black Lives Matter movement. Of course, he had a teammate, Marcelo, who celebrated on the pitch with a stance of solidarity, raising his fist in support of the movement. I think it's so important, obviously in what has been a very distressing period globally, inside and outside of sport, of course, in light of George Floyd's death and the protests that have ensued. It's so important to have the entire football community rally behind this. We've seen some incredible signs of solidarity in England with the knee taking upon kickoff and so on. But this was just really nice for Tony Cruz, obviously as a white high-profile player from Real Madrid, to come out in an interview with DAZN, I think it was, and be very, very vocal in his support, and says that he appreciates that this isn't just a drop in the bucket in a moment, that this is actually a sea change. It was really, really nice to see. And lastly, for me, that this might have been my favorite story of the week, La Liga actually launched a socioeconomic project in a Jordanian refugee camp this week, a sport for development project that seeks to use football as an opportunity to encourage life skills, and to teach, a whole host of things that sport has the ability to teach when it comes for sport being used as development. But in particular, this is a wonderful opportunity to get women in the refugee camp to integrate with football in an area that for years, traditionally has been a male-dominated zone as far as sport interaction goes. So I will post the link here in the chat to everybody on the call, and I really, really encourage you to read up more about that. It's the most uplifting story, genuinely, I think you'll hear this week, next to some beautiful goals and whatnot and the great stuff we had on the pitch. Yeah, wonderful socioeconomic project in one of the Middle East's, by the way, largest refugee camps in Jordan. So incredible story, genuinely. Yeah.
And I think we can kind of use that to segue a bit into the use of football and its clubs and its leagues and its power brokers for social good, because I'm a big proponent of the idea of, a city's community club that, has a school for young boys and girls, U12, U14, all the way up. I really do believe that, coming out of COVID here, obviously it's been a deeply traumatic time for Europe, Michael, and you've probably seen it following Gazzetta dello Sport in Italy and stuff. This is a sport that, is probably going to play a very major role in Europe's kind of recovery out of this, not just physical, being back in stadiums and having something to watch, but from a spiritual element as well, in terms of being able to congregate and being able to have that pride in your sense of place again. For me, I just feel like football has a very key role to play here in the next year or two.
Yeah, it does. It really does. And this is not a new concept. I mean, football being used as an extension of community life and as really a reflection of the human condition. That's something we've seen for decades and decades. And there's so many generations of stories of people who can tell you that very connection that they've been able to build with their respective club. But yeah, I mean, during this period of isolation for a lot of people, football can be that unifying binding glue that brings you together in the best possible way. So I think now it can be argued, as you alluded to, that football can play a bigger role than it's ever played in community life, and especially in private life. If you're not going out as much as you once were, if you don't have your local bar or your pub opening up to welcome you to watch games, then connecting with it on a deeper level is incredibly vital. And this project goes one step further and decides to actually go right into the heat of a very challenging existence in this Jordanian refugee camp and build out, by the way, an entire program. This isn't a one-off event. This is a program that has legs to go on for a very long time and actually establish some roots. So yeah, magnificent. I think we're just moments away, I would imagine, from switching over to our next exciting guest. But
you got it. And we're actually excited to be joined now by Valour FC's José Galán. José, thanks for joining us. For those of you that don't know, Valour FC compete in the Canadian Premier League, which is entering its second season. José is from León in Spain, and he's spent time in the setups with Athletico Madrid B and C, as well as Almeria's B side for a number of seasons, about 10, 12 years ago. So José, thanks for joining us. And first off, just tell us a little bit about what your experience was like being part of the setup at clubs like Athletico Madrid and Almeria as well.
Hi, thanks so much for inviting me to stay with you. Nice to meet you, Carlos, Mike. I'm glad to be here, and yeah, it was a privilege to be inside or to belong to such a big club like Athletico Madrid. I was really lucky to stay in the team when Simeone was still player. That means I'm a little bit old already. Agüero in his first year there also, and I was lucky to stay with some big players now like Koke or David De Gea. So sharing the dressing room with these players in such a big club gives you, especially in this age, I signed there with 16, 17 years old, the competitive level you need to get and to stay and to play as professional. And I think everything I'm like professional right now, I owe it to Athletico Madrid. And afterwards also same thing in Almeria. I signed there because the team just promoted to the first division, and my first coach, or the coach who saw something in me when I was in the B team for Almeria B, it was Unai Emery. You can imagine. You could see from that moment that he was going to be he was already a top coach. And afterwards, it was Lillo that now becomes assistant coach for Pep Guardiola. So I would say that as player, maybe I was not so lucky, but I was very lucky with the coaches I got in my career. All of them were top, and I tried to learn a lot from them. So I'm very proud of belonging, for example, in La Liga for 2010, a La Liga team. It's something that everybody, when I was playing abroad, everybody's asking me about how is there, what players were there. I learned a lot from all of them, but also I said that, come on, there is nobody that even they are top players, but sometimes, especially with the Canadian players, that you have talent, if you work hard, if you trust in yourself, look at Afonso Davies or any other players, they are not that far as you think. So it's the only advice I can give to them.
Well, and that kind of transitions into my next question here, José, is that, you know, you have played everywhere. You've been in Jordan, you're now in Canada. I think there was a Thailand stop in there as well. So you have a sense of kind of what that level is in Spain at the grassroots and B and under 23 level. You've seen it in a whole bunch of other countries, and now you're here entering your second season with Valour in the CPL. And I guess my question is, you know, how far does Canada have to go? And what are some things that exist in Spain in terms of the youth setup and the coaching that you would like to see implemented here in Canada?
Well, it's true that for a country like Canada, I always wonder to myself, how it's possible Canada have not a professional league until this year. So when I found out there was a new league here, and I found out how the things were doing by the league, and the media also, I have to admit that One Soccer made a terrific job and everything. So I said, now it's time, and it was too late because you cannot. I play in other countries, you can say not as developed as Canada, and they have very good leagues with a lot of followers from all over the country. So this is important to have identity. Like now, Valour only in 1 year they got a lot of supporters and a lot of things in the city. They ask you, hey, you are for Valour, and people feel something like something from there, Winnipeg people. But another thing I saw especially from the academics, this is, I'm not here to, of course, to say nothing bad about the organization of Canada, but it's true that in Spain, the academies or the lower ages, when you are young, they are more organized, like the leagues, everything. I know here you have the handicap of the weather. Also, you have even like league on summer or summer. I still don't, even I coach some kids on this, I still don't know clear the picture. But in terms of quality, I see a lot of talent. A lot of players who I play with this year, I see they have talent and they have this, they work hard. And I don't think they are that far as the people know. And I tell you, as you said, that somebody who play with, I don't know, in Austria, played against Sadio Mane, for example. And of course, he was a good player, very good player, but you cannot expect sometimes this player is going to be that top. And they are. So when you play against them, so people and the players develop in different ways. And I see a lot of talent here. So I'm positive with Canadian football.
Jose, thanks for joining us. I absolutely love your Twitter bio with all the different flags. It's like, you give everybody a clear sense of this is a well-traveled man. He did around the world in 80 days, you'd think, with the number of flags you have. But in all seriousness, you've had an opportunity to see how football is consumed and how it's embraced in so many different places around the world that so many people aren't lucky to ever visit, let alone professionally play football in. So can you maybe tell our listeners which country maybe surprised you the most? Because I'd imagine you maybe went into a couple different contracts with different teams in areas where you didn't know anything about going to there. At least from a footballing standpoint, it was completely new. So which part of your journey opened your eyes the most to a footballing culture that prior to that you didn't know much about? Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Mike. Yeah. First of all, I have to say that everywhere in the world right now with this globalized world, you can see good players. Some people think, this guy is from Indonesia, this player, and they underestimate already because it sounds like there is not football there. But believe me, in any corner, in any professional league in the world, now professional league, especially now in this kind of life, every country have foreign players, foreign coaches that they bring even in the academy, whatever for. Now everything is more equal. So even if Indonesia or I don't know any other team in Thailand play against La Liga team, of course there is still a lot of difference. But the difference now, and you can see the national team games even in Europe when Andorra is a small country that even they play against France and maybe they lose 2-0, they don't lose 10-0 or 6-0, and they have top players. So that's for sure. And the other thing. I think the country which really impressed me was Thailand. It was my first experience. People was a little bit, come on, this guy comes from La Liga, from Premier Almeria, and he goes to Thailand with 24 years. Come on, here they start to, even the journalists and some said, come on, this guy was he has a future here in Spain or whatever, in Europe. He goes there to play with elephants. I remember this quote, like, they don't play football, they play with elephants, something like that. Afterwards, I was the first guy who played in Thailand. After me, a lot of players, Arthur, players from La Liga, even from first division of Spain, they joined there. And like at the end, we talk between us, and the people can say, hey, come on, the football there is not bad. They have quality. These Thai players have quality. And everybody say that, even players who play in La Liga say, hey, it's not easy to play here. It's not easy. Different football, but they have still quality. It was not easy, and the level of football is better than the people think. And another country was Finland. When I arrived there, I thought it was going to be very physical. I arrived, my coach signed me for a kind of football I tried to play, building up from the kind of Spanish game. And when I arrived there, I saw a lot of good players. And even from my team, they signed 4 or 5 top leagues, like in France or in Netherlands. After I said, hey, the level is very good. Come on, Finland. People start to ask me. After 2-3 years, they I think they were the first team to qualify, the first national team to qualify to the Euro, or one of the first. So there's a good level. So my sum up is that everywhere you go in a professional league right now, or almost everywhere, there's good professional footballers.
And that kind of leads me into my final question, Jose, in that, you obviously played a couple of stints at Cultural Leonesa, and you've had games in Segunda B and Tercera and stuff, and the third and fourth divisions in Spain. And I guess for those viewers here that maybe don't know much about Spanish football beyond La Liga, beyond the first division, what can you tell us? And I know I was shocked when I watched San Fernando in Segunda B a couple of years ago. The quality in Spain, the depth of talent is just incredible. Tell us a little bit about, the level of play and the professionalism that exists in the second, third, and fourth divisions beyond La Liga for those of our listeners that maybe don't know.
Yeah, people, it's a big fight all over the world. Like when you say, okay, but this player, where he comes from? They say, no, from third division of Spain, like second division B, the third tier. Wow, but this is low. He said, yeah, but if you see the level of the second division B, probably is better than any first division of Canada or I don't know, Thailand or whatever, some of these leagues, or could have the same level or kind of. The thing is that normally, for example, in Asia, where I play a lot there, I play in Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, normally you only have 3 foreigners. But in Spain, especially in this second division B, all are Spanish. Most, like 90% of the players who play in second division B or have an experience in the first division of La Liga or second division, or they play in the academies of Real Madrid, Athletico Madrid, or Valencia, or some. So at the end, for all their careers, at the end they have to be good. It's true that maybe 10 years ago we could say maybe the level even was even higher because nobody went abroad of Spain to play. But right now, we found out that players like me, or second division B, or third division, they go to Poland, they go to all the leagues, Cyprus and Greece, and they are really, really good players who can be a top players in those leagues and make a good career. I know many examples of players who were playing in even third division, fourth division of Spain. They went to, to Poland, to Cyprus, even to Thailand, and they end up playing in a big club, like even in big clubs in Europe, so. There are a lot of ways to that success. And before that, in Spain, all the players wanted only to play in La Liga. Even me, I always say that I have something inside that I never could play like debut and make a debut in La Liga, even if I was part of the team. But we thought for ourselves, okay, maybe we can make also a career. Everything doesn't end. The career of the player doesn't end on La Liga, and it's very difficult. We are talking about the first or the second top league in the world. So there is more football outside Spain, and we're starting to explore that, especially Spanish players.
Excellent. José Galán from Valour FC, Winnipeg's team in the Canadian Premier League. And Jose, before we let you go, just tell us where listeners and fans can find you on social media, and if they're in the Winnipeg area, where they can reach out to Valour as well.
Yeah, I hope you can watch us soon playing for Valour all over Canada. We're starting to play the league, but it's not my social media, my Twitter, my Instagram is Galán, Galan, JP 10, number 10. So you can find me there.
Fantastic. Jose, thank you so much for joining us, and best of luck this season when you guys get underway in the CPL.
Thank you. Nice to meet you.
Gracias.
Thank
Ciao.
You. Bye-bye. Ciao, ciao.
So there is José Galán from Valour FC offering up a pretty interesting perspective, Mike, in terms of, the fact that he was in a La Liga academy, he was in, Athletico Madrid's system, but also telling us that, there are other career paths both within Spain and outside of Spain for that Spanish football talent.
Yeah, it's no secret how deep the sport is. It's truly the world's game, and he's just an example of that. He's played in Thailand to Qatar to Cyprus and now Canada as well. But what I found fascinating was at the bit there at the end when he was saying how those players from the second division, from the third division in Spain, are now feeling much more comfortable jumping out and going to these otherwise lesser known leagues. And with the greatest respect, I mean, he mentioned Poland a couple times, for example, right? Poland top flight. I mean, that maybe 15, 20 years ago, and certainly before that, wouldn't have been an option, wouldn't even have been on someone's radar, someone who is totally bought into the idea of being born and raised in Spain and playing in Spain, somewhere in the Spanish football pyramid. But now we have so much increased access to those leagues, thank you, YouTube and a bunch of other sources, whereby it's not such a daunting foreign adventure to, pick up your bags as someone like Jose, a Spanish born but well-traveled footballer, and say, yeah, I'm going to go spend a year in Thailand. And we've even more recently, in a Canadian context, we've seen Kyle Larin pick up his bags, have a pretty comfortable gig going on at Orlando and MLS, and he went over to Turkey, and then that took him over to the Netherlands, and who knows where he'll go beyond that. But Ryan Telfer from the CPL, again, he had a short stint playing in Cyprus as well, I believe, a place that Jose has experience playing in. I think it's fantastic, and I think our appetite as fans for these leagues is just continuing to increase and increase, largely because we have the ability, thanks to the advent of the internet and to increased forms of social connection, to learn about these leagues. It's amazing, yeah.
Absolutely. So we've got two more quick bits. First off, we're going to get to a question from Facebook from intrepid listener Tyler McDonald. Do you guys see Iago Aspas leaving Vigo anytime soon after a subpar season? Great talent that could go to more successful clubs. Mike, I don't know how you feel about this, but at 32 and, being back at the club that he came up with, very close to his hometown of Moania, I don't see him leaving at this point. I mean, they could go down, and I think he's the kind of guy that would probably just stay at that club personally.
I think if he goes down, he definitely stays, because again of the emotional connection to the club that you had, and we've also seen the love that fans can build around a player when they stick out the toughest times. I mean, look at Parma's situation in Italy as well. I mean, Lucarelli was the captain there from Division 4, 3-2 back up to 1. And I think he can have the same effect and connection with his fans. Iago Aspas, I mean, I know everybody wants to sort of point the finger and look toward that experience on Merseyside that didn't go too well. But I think following that, coming home and finding this comfort level here in Celta, I think this is where he stays. If anything, he might be a perfect coup for a team who comes up from the Segunda. If the money's right and if the project is right, and if he's got a place in the team where he can be quite a leader, I think that could make sense going forward. But the age makes a huge difference here at 32 going on 33. I think he's really in the best possible position regardless of where they finish.
And not to mention, he already did the, leaving for a larger club thing with Liverpool in their initial round of, Fabio Borini, Brendan Rodgers era transfers that didn't really work out. But it didn't really work out for him. He only made 13 appearances for Liverpool, 0 goals. So I'd be shocked if he left Spain, and I think I'd be shocked if he left Vigo. So, Mike, that transitions us into our trivia kit giveaway. We have one kit. It is a themed question here, and it's a team that Colin spoke a bit about when we had him on earlier. Eibar, a team that are, kind of fluttering on the edge there right now with Mendilibar trying to keep them up. But the question, Mike, and we'll see if you can answer this one, maybe in the chat box, just for us to see if you know. What season, did Eibar make their La Liga debut? So again, the question, you can answer it on Zoom, you can answer it if you're watching live on Facebook. In what year did Eibar make their La Liga Primera División debut?
Genuinely one of the easiest clubs to fall in love with, by the way.
Fantastic with their stadium.
Yeah, the Pura, I think is the stadium name. And if anybody hasn't gotten a chance to see the La Liga 6 Dreams documentary on Amazon Prime, it profiles 6 different players across the Spanish top flight, and Eibar is one of them. And they give some really, really fantastic behind the scenes camera work, and they allow you to kind of go on a journey with the sporting director and the head coach and some of the players. I'm telling you, it's sort of a perfect romance story as far as small town football clubs go. And they've pulled off some scalps, by the way. I think that's always an easy way to get and fall in love with a team, is just look at the size disparity and then see who they've managed to pull victories out of. So yeah, fabulous club through and through.
Absolutely. So again, just to reiterate, you can type it in on the Zoom chat. You can submit it via Facebook. The question again is, in what year did Esti Eibar make their debut in La Liga? This is a club that lived in Divs 5 and 4 for the vast majority of the 20th century. They have made their La Liga debut at some point in the 21st century. What season was it? That's pretty much a wrap for us. Couple of games on deck shortly at 1:30 Eastern. Valladolid's taking on Getafe. Levante Athletico in a very interesting game. I've got the under 2.5 there. I just have a feeling that that's going to be a defensive dogfight. And of course, the big game today at 4 o'clock, Barcelona is taking on Athletic Bilbao. Other games to keep an eye on in this match day. Tomorrow at 4 o'clock, Real Madrid taking on Mallorca. And of course, the match that we highlighted with Colin Millar earlier, 4 p.m. on Thursday, Real Betis and Espanyol. So some really big matchups on deck, Mike.
Yeah, it's going to be exciting. I mean, I know it's the easy choice. I'm looking forward to Bilbao and Barcelona. I think, it's going to be interesting to see how the big clubs maintain their consistency because, of course, they're quality star players who can come onto the pitch after many months off and they still have something about them where they can win games, as has been proven since the return to play. But at the same time, you're also going to start to see which players who perform at an insanely high level. How can you keep that level so high? And Bilbao's the perfect team to kind of nip you and catch you by surprise. They have a well-run machine there as well. So it's just a game that in the past few years has also produced some really fun results. And I'm looking forward to that.
And we do have one final question before we leave you folks today, written in from Edwin. José Galán mentioned Unai Emery, a world-class manager who enjoyed enormous success at Sevilla. Why do you think Emery wasn't able to replicate that at Arsenal? Mike, I'll put that ball in your court. You're a tactician and a proven follower of the EPL. So for you, why did Emery not succeed at Arsenal? I know I have my own opinion, but I'll give you the floor for this one.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, as being someone who wasn't connected in any way to the club, I don't want to speculate or speak out of turn about the real reasons why it didn't work out. And in any of these situations, I mean, first of all, he came into an enormous job, replacing a club legend, someone who, by all accounts, revolutionized the way things were done at Arsenal, in Arsene Wenger, of course. And I kind of see parallels between the task that he was presented with and this in terms of the same one that David Moyes was presented with post Ferguson as well. So arguably the hardest managerial position to take on in going into that season. But if I'm just speaking on behalf of what you started to hear from a lot of pundits and fans during the course of that year, there seemed to be some communication issues. There didn't seem to be a huge relationship from Emery to the supporters and conversely Emery to the players as well. So I don't know on the training pitch if that is exactly what broke the team down. I think what you started to realize is there was a complete mishandling as well of Nicolas Pepe. That seemed to be sort of something that if you couldn't get him on board, and that was a big money signing that came with a lot of promise, it would start to sort of show a lot of the cracks that exist in other areas of the field. I think it might have been a personality and a connection thing, but again, that's me largely speaking out of turn. I wasn't close to the club to know. I think it was for the better, though, and fans can already tell through Mikel Arteta, at least in the early stages, despite some Arsenal-esque results of late, there seems to be something in place. There seems to be a much more coherent plan that's ready to be executed, and that could be the early days being allured by the fact that he worked under Pep, and that seems very sexy, and it's something we want to believe in. But as also a former player, I think there was a relationship that was struck as soon as he walked into the clubhouse, one that Emery, from all accounts, took a tough time to develop. So,
yeah, it's going to be interesting to see where he lands too. Some people have already highlighted the Real Betis job. Once their sporting director steps aside at the end of the season, but I would assume that we're more likely to see Unai Emery back in La Liga next year than anywhere else, just given how his foray at Arsenal went. Obviously, it imploded spectacularly. They struggled to even make it out of the Europa League group stage. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see where he lands. I know that there's the Sevilla angle, but, the dramatist in me would love to see Unai Emery take over at Real Betis just because he's a personality. The Spanish media loves him. And Real Betis is a club where we saw it with Quique Setien. A charismatic manager can go a long way at a club like that.
Yeah, and he's an exceptional manager. You know, you don't want to unfairly beat up on someone because sometimes it's a thankless sort of role being a manager. You know, you don't win trophies and you're beat up for not winning trophies, and apparently in those arguments that's all that matters, right? But then you get someone who is a proven trophy winner. I mean, and he did that at Sevilla. He showed he's got pedigree in that area. But then all of a sudden he's got, you know, less than a season of bad results at Arsenal, and then bang, he's gone, right? So the managerial merry-go-round goes on, and it's not something that I don't think it's something that's specifically directed as him as a tactician. I just think that the shelf life for success in England by and large is very short, and he had a gigantic job on his plate, taking over again someone from Arsene Wenger, who was, you know, father figure at the club and someone who genuinely reshaped Arsenal Football Club. It was a tall task. So
yeah, no doubt. But excited to see where he lands. It's going to be a very interesting, shortened, silly season in Spain this year, most likely. But that's a wrap for us here on Footy Talks La Liga. Mike, a pleasure as always, and always great chatting. We look forward to having a couple more of these, including a trivia night later up in July.
Coming up soon, yeah, and do keep tabs on what's coming up next on Footy Talks via Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. So connect with us on social media, and thank you all for joining. It was a lot of fun.
Absolutely. And again, a quick thank you to our two guests today, Colin Millar, author of Frying Pan of Spain, available on Amazon, and Valour FC midfielder José Galán, who provided some really interesting insight into being a player and that side of things in Spanish football, and then leaving as well. So for Mike DeLuca, I'm Carlos Verde, and for all of us here at Footy Talks, thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time.
Bye, guys.